The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber gleamed under the light of 3 artificial suns. Inside, representatives from dozens of species sat in their designated sections, but everyone knew who really controlled the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire held the center seats, their dark-scaled bodies radiating the confidence of natural predators. Admiral Krixtal stood at the speaking platform, his yellow eyes scanning the assembled delegates. His people had ruled this sector for over 2,000 years, and today marked another victory to add to their endless list of conquests. The holographic display behind him showed images of their latest target, a small world called Kepler 442b, inhabited by peaceful herbivores who had surrendered without firing a single shot. "Another world brings order under our protection," Krixtal announced, his voice carrying the authority that came from being born on one of the galaxy's most dangerous deathworlds. The Kalani people now enjoy the benefits of proper civilization. The Ibida, other council members nodded appropriately. They all knew what protection meant. The Kalani would work in Vorthak mines, their children would be educated in Vorthak schools, and their resources would flow to the Empire. It was the natural order of things. Strong species ruled, weak species served. Delegate Thoxran from the insectoid Kittic Collective raised one of his 4 arms. "Admiral, our scouts report 17 more primitive worlds in the outer spiral. When shall we begin the next expansion?" Krixtal's mouth curved in what passed for a smile among his people. "Soon, very soon. Our fleets grow stronger every cycle, and these soft species continue to multiply like insects." He paused, ignoring the slight from Thoxran. "They live on their garden worlds, never knowing real struggle, never developing the strength that comes from true hardship." The other deathworlder species in the council murmured agreement. The rock-skinned granite lords nodded their massive heads. The crystalline shard collective pulsed with approving light. The toxic-breathing venom tails hissed their satisfaction. They all understood the simple truth that governed galactic politics. Species evolved from dangerous worlds became dangerous themselves, while those from comfortable planets remained weak and helpless. The galaxy belongs to those strong enough to claim it, Krixtal continued. "We Deathworlders have proven our superiority across 1,000 campaigns. No soft-world species has ever posed a real threat to our dominance. Far across the galaxy, in a small solar system that most galactic maps didn't even bother to label, Captain Jiwon sat in the command center of the Korean Space Defense Force. The underground facility hummed with quiet activity as her team monitored the vast emptiness around their home planet. Earth had only recently developed faster-than-light communication, and they spent most of their time listening to signals from distant stars. "Captain, I'm picking up something unusual, Lieutenant," Minho called from his station. His fingers moved quickly across the holographic controls as he tried to make sense of the readings. Multiple energy signatures approaching from the Proxima Centauri direction. Jiwon moved to stand behind his chair, studying the data scrolling across his screen. She had been tracking unusual signals for months, but nothing like this. These weren't natural phenomena or random space debris. The patterns were too organized, too purposeful. "How many?" she asked. "At least 50 distinct signatures, maybe more. They're still too far away to get an accurate count." Minho adjusted his instruments, trying to get a clearer reading. "Captain, based on the energy output and formation patterns, these look like spacecraft." The command center fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics. First contact protocols existed in theory, but no one had ever expected to actually use them. Earth had been sending radio signals into space for over a century without receiving any response. Most people had started to believe they were alone in the universe. Engineer. Neon looked up from her diagnostic panel. Should I alert the other defense stations? Ji-won considered her options. If these were indeed alien spacecraft, this moment would change everything for humanity. She thought about the protocols they had developed, the careful plans for peaceful first contact, the hope that any advanced civilization would be friendly to a younger species just starting to explore the stars. Send a priority alert to all stations, she decided. Code yellow, potential first contact situation. Have them begin monitoring all frequencies and prepare the translation protocols. As her team worked to track the approaching signals, Ji-won thought about her grandmother's stories of the Korean War, when foreign armies had last threatened their homeland. But this was different. These visitors might be explorers like themselves, scientists seeking knowledge, or diplomats hoping to welcome Earth into a larger galactic community. She had no way of knowing that the approaching fleet belonged to Admiral Kriegstahl's nephew, Commander Zethrock, who was leading what he considered a routine scouting mission to catalog and subjugate another primitive world. In the files of his flagship, Earth was listed simply as Sol 3, Class Deathworld, Deathworld, Primitive. Species detected. The classification should have been a warning, but the Vorthak had grown so confident in their supremacy that they rarely bothered to read the detailed reports anymore. To them, all non-Deathworld species were the same, weak, compliant, and easily conquered. The fact that Earth rated as the highest possible danger classification on the galactic scale was just another number in a database that no one thought to check. Commander Zethrock reviewed his fleet status as they approached the edge of the Sol system. 15 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and his flagship carrying enough firepower to level a continent. It was probably overkill for another garden world full of peaceful farmers, but the High Command liked to make impressive first impressions. Sir, we're receiving primitive radio transmissions from the target world, his communications officer reported. Basic electromagnetic radiation, nothing sophisticated. Any signs of space-based defenses? Negative, sir. A few small orbital platforms that appear to be research stations. No weapon signatures detected. Zethrock settled back in his command chair. Another easy conquest. Another world added to the Empire's growing territory. His uncle would be pleased with such a quick victory. Perhaps this success would finally earn him command of his own sector. He had no idea that far below on the surface of the blue-green world they were approaching, millions of humans were going about their daily lives completely unaware that their existence was about to change forever. Children played in parks while their parents worked in offices and factories. Students attended classes where they learned about their planet's history of struggle and survival. Soldiers trained for conflicts they hoped would never come. Earth spun peacefully in its orbit, its surface scarred by countless ice ages, volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, and climate shifts that had forged its inhabitants into something the galaxy had never encountered before. But to the approaching Vorthak fleet, it looked like just another comfortable world inhabited by another weak species ready to join the Empire. The stage was set for a meeting that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization, though neither side yet understood what was about to unfold. Commander Zethrock's flagship entered Earth's outer atmosphere with the confidence of a predator that had never met its equal. His fleet spread across the sky in perfect formation, their dark hulls blocking out the sun over major population centers. From his command deck, he looked down at the blue and green world spinning beneath them and felt the familiar satisfaction of another easy conquest. Begin standard first contact protocols, he ordered his communications officer. Send the usual demands. The transmission that reached Earth's defense stations was broadcast in 17 different languages, though none of them were human. The computer systems at the Korean Space Defense Force headquarters worked frantically to decode the alien message, running it through every translation program they had developed. Captain Ji-won watched the data stream across her screens, her heart racing as she realized this was really happening. After decades of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, they finally had their answer. But as the translation programs began to make sense of the alien message, her excitement turned to growing alarm. "Captain, we've got a partial translation," Lieutenant Minho announced, his voice tight with concern. "It's some kind of ultimatum. They're demanding immediate surrender and compliance with something called the Galactic Council Authority." G1 read the translated text as it appeared on her screen. "Primitive species of Sol 3, you are now under the protection of the Vorthak Empire. Resistance is futile. Prepare for immediate integration into proper galactic civilization. Your leaders must present themselves for processing within one standard time period." "Processing?" Engineer Naeon asked, looking up from her station. "What do they mean by processing?" Before anyone could answer, the alien ships began moving into position over Earth's major cities. Ji-won watched in horror as massive vessels took threatening positions above Seoul, Tokyo, New York, and London. This wasn't the peaceful first contact humanity had dreamed about. This was an invasion. "Get me the president," she ordered, "and alert all military commands worldwide. Code Red." On the flagship above Seoul, Commander Zethrock grew impatient as the primitive world's response time stretched beyond acceptable limits. Most species surrendered within minutes of seeing his fleet's overwhelming power. These humans were taking far too long to acknowledge their new reality. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the surface," his communications officer reported. "They appear to be attempting diplomatic contact." Zethrock's scaled features twisted in annoyance. "Diplomacy? They have no position from which to negotiate. Begin orbital bombardment of their primary administrative center. A small demonstration should clarify their situation." The first energy beam struck a government building in downtown Seoul, turning 3 city blocks into a crater of melted steel and glass. But instead of the expected immediate surrender, something unprecedented happened. The humans began fighting back. Sergeant Tae-hyung had been conducting a routine training exercise with his unit when the alien ships appeared. As soon as the first bombardment hit, years of military training kicked in, while other species might have panicked or surrendered. When faced with overwhelming force, humans had been dealing with overwhelming force their entire evolutionary history. "All units, begin immediate civilian evacuation," he commanded over his radio. "Pattern Delta 7, just like we practiced for natural disasters." Across the city, emergency sirens wailed as humans enacted evacuation procedures they had developed for earthquakes, typhoons, and other catastrophes. In minutes, millions of people were moving toward underground shelters with an efficiency that shocked the watching aliens. Dr. Soyeon coordinated the medical response from her hospital's emergency command center. She had spent her entire career preparing for disasters, from viral outbreaks to massive earthquakes. An alien invasion was certainly new, but the principles remained the same. Save as many lives as possible, maintain order, and never give up. "Convert subway stations to emergency shelters," she ordered her staff. "Just like the protocols for chemical attacks. And get me casualty reports from the impact zone." Commander Zethrock stared at his tactical displays in growing confusion. The energy beam that should have killed thousands had resulted in surprisingly few casualties. The humans had somehow moved most of their population to safety in mere minutes. More disturbing still, they weren't sending surrender signals. Instead, his ships were being targeted by primitive but surprisingly effective ground-based weapons. "Sir, the surface dwellers are launching projectiles at our vessels," his tactical officer reported. "Primitive chemical rockets, but they're targeting our engines and communication arrays with unusual accuracy." "Impossible," Zethrock snarled. "No species resists after the first demonstration. Increase bombardment intensity." But as more energy. Beams struck the city below. The human response only grew more organized. Emergency vehicles raced through streets under alien fire, pulling survivors from damaged buildings. Soldiers positioned themselves to protect evacuation routes, drawing alien fire away from civilian areas. Medical teams worked in makeshift field. Hospitals treating the wounded even as explosions lit up the sky around them. The aliens had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never encountered a species that treated their non-combatants as precious resources to be protected at any cost. Most galactic civilizations had clear hierarchies where leaders and important individuals were saved first. These humans seemed to prioritize their weakest members: children, elderly, and injured. Captain Jiwan received updates from defense stations around the world as similar scenes played out over every major city. The aliens seemed to expect immediate surrender. But humans were responding with organized resistance that nobody had trained for because nobody had thought it would be necessary. "Captain, I'm getting reports from military commands worldwide," Lieutenant Minho announced. "They want to know if we should attempt nuclear retaliation." Jiwan considered the option for a moment, then shook her head. "Not yet. We don't know enough about their capabilities or intentions. Keep trying diplomatic channels." She activated the emergency broadcast system that would send her message to the alien fleet on every frequency they could access. Speaking slowly and clearly, she addressed the invaders directly. "This is Captain Jiwan of the Earth Defense Force. We are prepared to discuss peaceful relations, but we will not surrender our independence. If you continue attacking civilian targets, we will be forced to defend ourselves." The message reached Zethrock's flagship just as his tactical officer reported another impossible development. "Sir, the humans are somehow interfering with our targeting systems. Their primitive technology shouldn't be capable of electronic warfare." "What do you mean, interfering?" "They're using basic radio transmissions to create interference patterns that disrupt our lock-on systems. It's crude, but effective. And, sir, our landing parties are reporting unexpected resistance from surface forces." Zethrock felt something he had never experienced in 3 decades of military service: doubt. These weren't supposed to be warriors. His intelligence reports described a species that lived on a comfortable garden world with abundant resources and peaceful conditions. They should have been helpless farmers and merchants, not organized soldiers capable of coordinated resistance. "Send a message to High Command," he ordered reluctantly. "Request additional support for pacification operations. These humans appear to have more military capability than our initial scans indicated." On the surface, Sergeant Tae-hyung led his squad through the rubble-filled streets, searching for trapped civilians. His men moved with practiced efficiency, using hand signals and cover tactics they had learned from generations of human warfare. When alien ground forces landed in the city center, they found themselves facing opponents who treated every alley and building as potential weapons. Dr. Soyeon worked without rest in her underground medical center, treating blast victims and coordinating with other hospitals through secure communication networks. She had seen the destructive power of the alien weapons, but she had also seen Something else. The invaders seemed confused by human behavior. They kept targeting what they thought were command centers, but humans had learned long ago to distribute authority and maintain multiple backup systems. As the first day of invasion drew to a close, Commander Zethrock reviewed his casualty reports with growing alarm. He had lost more ships and personnel in one day fighting these primitive humans than in his last 10 conquest campaigns combined. Worse still, the humans showed no signs of breaking. If anything, their resistance was becoming more organized and effective. For the first time in Vorthok history, a routine conquest was turning into a real war. And Commander Zethrock was beginning to suspect that his people might have seriously underestimated their new enemies. 3 weeks into what should have been a simple conquest, Commander Zethrock found himself staring at tactical reports that made no sense. His fleet had lost 6 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and over 3,000 personnel to a species that wasn't even supposed to have spaceflight capability. The humans were fighting with a ferocity and tactical brilliance that defied every assumption about soft-world inhabitants. Colonel Jae-won stood in the underground command bunker beneath the Korean mountains, coordinating Earth's defense with military leaders from around the world. The facility had been carved into solid rock during the Cold War, designed to survive nuclear attacks. Now it served as the nerve center for humanity's first interstellar war. Report from the European theater, his aide announced. The aliens attempted another landing near Berlin. German and French forces repelled them using modified construction equipment as mobile artillery. Jae-won nodded grimly. Humans were proving remarkably adaptable at turning civilian technology into weapons. Mining explosives became improvised bombs. Construction vehicles became armored fighting platforms. Even commercial drones were being weaponized faster than the aliens could adapt their countermeasures. What about the Pacific Front? Japanese and Australian forces report successful guerrilla operations. They're using the terrain to their advantage, forcing the aliens to fight in environments where their technology advantages are minimized. The Colonel studied the global tactical display, noting patterns that even he found surprising. Humans were instinctively using tactics that apparently no other galactic species had ever developed. Instead of fighting set battles where superior alien technology would dominate, human forces dissolved into small, mobile units that struck quickly and disappeared. Private Yuna crawled through the wreckage of downtown Seoul, her engineering background, helping her understand how the alien technology worked. While other species might have been awed by the invaders' advanced systems, she saw them as just another set of machines with predictable failure points. She had already figured out how to disable alien communication systems using modified phone transmitters. Now she was working on something more ambitious, converting alien energy weapons into human portable devices. The power cells were designed for creatures much stronger than humans, but basic physics was universal. "Got it," she whispered into her radio as she successfully removed an intact weapon from a destroyed alien vehicle. "The power coupling is compatible with our electrical grid. I can modify this to work with our existing systems." Within hours, her modifications were being transmitted to resistance cells worldwide. Humans began carrying alien weapons powered by car batteries and portable generators. The sight of primitive humans wielding advanced energy weapons was becoming a nightmare that haunted alien ground forces. Commander Seok-jin led a desperate counterattack against the alien fleet position above the Pacific Ocean. His hastily assembled squadron consisted of modified civilian aircraft equipped with weapons improvised from industrial components. It should have been suicide, but the aliens weren't prepared for enemies who treated suicide missions as acceptable tactics. "All units, remember the plan," he transmitted to his pilots. We only need to damage their engines. Don't worry about getting home. The human fighters dove through the alien defensive screen like bullets, too small and fast for the massive alien weapons to track effectively. Seokjin watched his wingman disappear in a flash of alien fire, but the sacrifice opened a gap in their formation. He guided his aircraft straight into the alien flagship's engine compartment, his improvised explosive device detonating inside their power core. The alien flagship went down in flames, taking Commander Zethrock with it. But more importantly, it took with it the invaders' confidence in their own superiority. The destruction of the flagship sent shockwaves through the remaining alien fleet. For the first time in their species' military history, the Vorthak had lost a command vessel to primitive opponents. Emergency transmissions began flowing back to the Galactic Council, each one more desperate than the last. Request immediate. Reinforcement, the new fleet commander transmitted. Enemy capabilities exceed all projections. Repeat, enemy capabilities exceed all projections. The message reached Admiral Krixtall as he was reviewing routine conquest reports from other sectors. He read the transmission 3 times before accepting that it wasn't some kind of clerical error. A primitive species from a garden world was not only resisting Vorthak forces, but actually winning battles against them. Prepare the second battle fleet, he ordered his staff, and request detailed analysis of this human species. Something is very wrong with our intelligence reports. Back on Earth, the successful counterattack had given humanity's defenders new hope and new captured technology to study. Dr. Jisu worked around the clock in her laboratory, analyzing alien biological samples and equipment captured from the destroyed ships. What she discovered challenged everything humans thought they knew about life in the galaxy. The aliens, who called themselves deathworlders, had evolved from planets that were actually less dangerous than Earth. Their home world had stable weather, predictable geological activity, and relatively few predatory species. Their physiology shows adaptation to high-gravity environments, she reported to the Defense Council. But their reflexes are actually slower than human normal. Their sensory systems are more sensitive, but less adaptable to changing conditions. Specialist Wanho studied the alien database they had recovered from the crashed flagship. What he found there was even more shocking than the biological analysis. According to galactic classification systems, Earth rated as a Class 12 deathworld, the highest possible danger rating. They classify our normal weather patterns as catastrophic environmental events, he reported in disbelief. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, they consider these to be planet-killing disasters. Most galactic species couldn't survive a typical Earth winter. The implications were staggering. Humans had evolved on a world so dangerous that it would be considered uninhabitable by most galactic standards. The constant environmental threats had created a species with reflexes, adaptability, and survival instincts that far exceeded anything the Deathworlders had ever encountered. Lieutenant Hyunwoo led a boarding party against one of the remaining alien cruisers using tactics borrowed from historical naval warfare. The aliens had designed their ships to resist external attack, but they had never considered the possibility of enemies willing to fight hand-to-hand inside their own vessels. The human boarding party moved through the alien ship like a virus, using their smaller size and greater agility to navigate ventilation systems and maintenance passages. When they encountered alien crew members, the result was inevitably the same. The larger, stronger aliens were overwhelmed by opponents who fought with a speed and viciousness they couldn't match. Bridge secured, Hyunwoo reported as his team took control of the alien vessel. These things are tough, but they move like they're underwater. It's like fighting in slow motion. Dr. Jisu's analysis had provided the explanation. The aliens were adapted for high-gravity worlds with dense atmospheres. In Earth's environment, they were operating at the edge of their physical capabilities, while humans were in their optimal element. The captured alien cruiser provided humanity, with its first intact example of galactic technology. Human engineers swarmed over the vessel, reverse engineering systems that were advanced, but not incomprehensible. The aliens had relied on brute force engineering solutions, while humans were already finding ways to make the same systems more efficient and adaptable. Their technology is impressive, Engineer Nayan reported, but it's designed by species that never had to deal with resource scarcity or unpredictable environments. Everything is overbuilt and inflexible. We can improve on almost every system. As news of the human victories spread through the remaining alien fleet, something unprecedented began to happen. Alien units started requesting permission to withdraw. Species that had conquered the galaxy through superior firepower and intimidation were discovering what it felt like to be afraid. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were winning them in ways that violated every assumption about how warfare worked in the galaxy. They protected their weak instead of sacrificing them. They used terrain and environment as weapons. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to view death in battle as an acceptable outcome, rather than a failure to be avoided at all costs. Commander Zethrock's replacement, Admiral Vorthak himself, reviewed the tactical reports with growing alarm. These weren't the actions of a primitive species lucky enough to win a few skirmishes. This was evidence of a warrior culture that had been shaped by millions of years of struggle against environmental conditions that would have destroyed most galactic civilizations. For the first time in their species' history, the Vorthak were facing opponents who were genuinely more dangerous than they were, and the terrifying reality was beginning to sink in. If humans could fight like this while defending their home world, what would they be capable of if they ever went on the offensive? The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened under circumstances that had never occurred before in the organization's 3,000-year history. For the first time, a member species was requesting military assistance against what their reports described as a primitive civilization. The massive chamber buzzed with confused conversation as delegates tried to understand how the mighty Vorthak Empire could be struggling against inhabitants of an uncharted garden world. Admiral Krixtal stood before the assembled council, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something approaching desperation. The holographic display behind him showed tactical readouts that seemed impossible. Vorthak casualties in the thousands, entire fleet elements destroyed or captured, and ground forces in full retreat from multiple theaters. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. "The situation on Sol 3 has exceeded all projections. The human species demonstrates military capabilities that do not match their technological profile." Delegate Thoxran from the Chittic Collective chittered in confusion. "Admiral, your reports indicate that humans fight with primitive chemical weapons and modified civilian equipment. How can such inferior technology threaten Vorthak forces?" The question hung in the air as Krixtal struggled to find an explanation. That wouldn't sound like the desperate excuses of a failing commander. The truth was that Vorthak technology worked exactly as designed, but the humans were using tactics and strategies that no galactic species had ever developed. "The humans employ asymmetric warfare," he said finally. "They avoid direct confrontation where our technological advantages would be decisive. Instead, they strike at vulnerable points using unconventional methods." The crystalline shard collective representative pulsed with skeptical light. All species attempt guerrilla tactics when facing superior forces. None have succeeded against deathworlder military doctrine. But Admiral Krickstall had reviewed the combat footage personally, and he knew this was different. Other species used guerrilla tactics out of desperation, falling back on ambushes and sabotage when they couldn't win conventional battles. Humans seemed to prefer these methods, treating them as primary tactics rather than last resorts. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Hyun Woo was demonstrating exactly why human tactics were so effective against conventional galactic military thinking. His strike team had infiltrated an alien forward base using nothing more sophisticated than climbing equipment and waterproof clothing. While the aliens scanned for technological signatures and energy weapons, humans simply walked through their perimeter during a thunderstorm. Remember, they can't see well in low-light conditions, Hyun-woo whispered to his team as they approached the alien compound. And their hearing is optimized for different frequencies. Standard human speech is almost inaudible to them. The assault began at dawn, when alien circadian rhythms were at their lowest point. Human forces emerged from concealment in the surrounding forest, moving through terrain that the aliens had dismissed as impassable. What looked like dense jungle to galactic sensors was familiar ground to humans who had evolved in similar environments. The aliens had positioned their defenses to counter attacks by armored vehicles and aircraft, but they had no protocols for enemies who could climb trees, swim rivers, and navigate by landmarks invisible to their technology. The base fell in less than 20 minutes, with the alien garrison captured before they could send a distress signal. Dr. Jisoo examined the latest batch of alien prisoners in her research facility, comparing their biology to the growing database of galactic species information. Each new sample reinforced her earlier conclusions. These self-proclaimed deathworlders were actually less adapted to dangerous environments than humans. Their muscle density is impressive, she noted in her report, but their nervous system response time is 40% slower than human average. They're built for strength and endurance in stable conditions, not rapid adaptation to changing threats. The psychological profiles were even more revealing. Galactic species seemed to view warfare as a last resort, something to be ended as quickly as possible with minimal casualties. They fought to establish dominance and then negotiate surrender terms. The concept of fighting to total victory or death was apparently foreign to their thinking. Specialist Wanho had been analyzing captured alien databases for weeks, piecing together a picture of galactic civilization that explained why humans were so successful against supposedly superior opponents. The galaxy was dominated by species that had achieved technological advancement through cooperation and resource abundance, not through constant struggle against hostile environments. They've never had to develop rapid innovation under pressure, he reported to the Defense Council. Their technology advances slowly over centuries because they've never faced existential threats that required immediate solutions. Humans, by contrast, had spent their entire evolutionary history developing new technologies and tactics in response to changing conditions. Ice ages had forced them to innovate or die. Natural disasters had taught them to rebuild and adapt. Competition with other predators had shaped them into creatures capable of thinking tactically under extreme stress. The captured alien cruiser had become humanity's window into galactic technology and thinking. Human engineers worked around the clock to understand not just how alien systems functioned, but why they had been designed the way they were. What they discovered was technology that prioritized reliability over adaptability, standardization over innovation. Everything is built to last for centuries without modification, engineer Neon reported. But that means it can't be quickly adapted to new situations. We can modify our equipment in hours to meet specific mission requirements. It takes them months to implement design changes. The implications went far beyond military technology. Galactic civilization appeared to be built on the assumption that conditions would remain stable and predictable. Species expanded slowly, colonized carefully, and maintained the same social and technological structures for millennia. Pilot Kyungmin had been testing modified alien fighter craft, comparing their performance to human-built equivalents. The results were enlightening and disturbing in equal measure. "Their ships are faster and more powerful," she reported, "but they can't handle environmental stresses that would be routine for Earth-based aircraft. Atmospheric turbulence that human pilots considered normal flying conditions caused alien systems to malfunction. Weather patterns that humans flew through routinely forced alien aircraft to ground themselves. Most shocking of all, the aliens seemed incapable of the kind of intuitive flying that human pilots learned naturally. They're too dependent on automated systems," Kyungmin explained. "When conditions exceed programmed parameters, they can't adapt. Human pilots are trained to handle situations their instruments can't measure." Captain Ji-won reviewed global defense, reports from her command center, watching as human forces continued to achieve impossible victories against technologically superior opponents. But she was beginning to understand that the aliens weren't truly superior in any meaningful sense. They were advanced, but advancement without adaptability was just elaborate fragility. "The aliens fight like they're following a textbook," she observed to her staff. "They have standard procedures for every situation, but they can't handle anything outside their experience." The latest intelligence reports suggested that alien forces were becoming increasingly demoralized by their failures. Against human defenders, units that had conquered dozens of worlds were requesting evacuation from Earth after suffering casualties that would barely register in human military history. "They're not used to losing," Lieutenant Minho pointed out. "Every species they've encountered before surrendered quickly or was overwhelmed by superior firepower. They don't know how to fight a prolonged campaign against determined opposition." Dr. Soyon had been studying alien medical data recovered from captured facilities, trying to understand the psychological impact of sustained combat on galactic species. What she found explained much about why human resistance was so effective. "Their stress responses are designed for short-term threats," she reported. "Extended conflict causes rapid psychological deterioration. They literally cannot maintain fighting effectiveness over the timescales that humans consider normal for military operations." The aliens were discovering that humans could fight for months or years without showing the psychological breakdown that affected galactic species after weeks of combat. Human soldiers were trained to function under conditions of constant stress that would incapacitate alien forces. As reports from Earth reached the Galactic Council, the implications were becoming clear to more perceptive delegates. The Vorthak Empire wasn't just losing battles against a primitive species. They were being systematically outfought by opponents who treated warfare as a natural extension of their survival instincts. The humans weren't trying to match alien technology or copy alien tactics. They were fighting the way humans had always fought, by adapting quickly to changing conditions, using every available resource as a potential weapon, and refusing to accept defeat as long as resistance remained possible. For species that had spent millennia believing that technological advancement equated to deep in the captured alien database, Specialist Wanho made a discovery that changed everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. Hidden in the environmental classification files was Earth's official galactic designation, Sol 3, Class Twund. Deathworld, Extreme Hazard. Do not approach without environmental suits. Captain G1, you need to see this, he called across the analysis center, his voice tight with disbelief. I found Earth's classification in their database. G1 approached his workstation and stared at the alien text scrolling across the screen. Even with translation software, some concepts didn't translate well, but the meaning was clear enough. According to galactic standards, Earth wasn't a garden world full of soft inhabitants. It was the most dangerous planet classification system could measure. Class Do3 means what exactly? She asked. Wanho pulled up the classification criteria, reading the translated text with growing amazement. Class Do3 indicates a world where multiple extinction-level environmental threats occur regularly. Extreme weather patterns, unpredictable, geological activity, aggressive predatory species, and atmospheric conditions that would be lethal to most galactic life forms. The implications hit G1 like a physical blow. Humans hadn't evolved on a comfortable garden world that made them soft and peaceful. They had evolved on a planet so dangerous that most galactic species would consider it uninhabitable. The aliens had invaded what they thought was a world full of weak prey animals, only to discover they were attacking the galactic equivalent of apex predators. Dr. Che Young had been analyzing atmospheric data from captured alien equipment, trying to understand why the invaders seemed to struggle with Earth's environment. What she discovered supported Wanho's findings in ways that were both fascinating and terrifying. Their atmospheric processors are designed for stable, controlled environments, she reported to the Defense Council. Earth's natural weather patterns exceed the operational parameters of their environmental systems. A typical summer thunderstorm, which humans considered routine weather, would overwhelm alien atmospheric processors and force their personnel to seek shelter. Winter conditions that humans lived and worked in comfortably would kill most galactic species within hours. They classify our seasonal temperature variations as extreme environmental fluctuations, Dr. Che Young continued. What we call normal weather, they call natural disasters. Sergeant Junho was leading a patrol through the mountains outside Seoul when this knowledge proved its practical value. His unit had been tracking alien reconnaissance drones for 3 days, moving through terrain that humans considered challenging but manageable. When they finally encountered an alien ground team, the environmental differences became brutally apparent. The aliens wore full environmental suits and moved slowly through the forest, their equipment constantly warning them about dangerous atmospheric conditions. The humans wore standard infantry gear and moved through the same environment as if it were a training exercise. "Contact!" Junho whispered into his radio as his squad positioned themselves for an ambush. 6 aliens, full environmental gear, moving like they're afraid the trees are going to attack them. The engagement was over in seconds. The aliens' environmental suits, designed to protect them from Earth's lethal atmosphere, made them slow and clumsy. Their weapons were powerful, but required stable firing positions that the rough terrain didn't provide. The humans moved through the forest like they had been born there, because in a very real sense, they had been. "This is too easy," one of Junho's soldiers commented as they secured the alien equipment. "It's like fighting children wearing their parents' clothes." But Dr. Che Young's analysis revealed that the aliens weren't incompetent. They were simply operating far outside their evolutionary parameters. Their equipment and tactics were designed for worlds where environmental conditions remained stable and predictable. Earth's constantly changing conditions required a level of adaptability that most galactic species had never needed to develop. The psychological impact of this revelation was spreading through both human and alien forces. Human defenders began to understand that they weren't facing superior beings who had graciously descended from the stars to civilize them. They were facing invaders who were fundamentally less adapted to dangerous environments than they were. Captain Jiwon reviewed the updated intelligence reports with a mixture of awe and growing confidence. If Earth is classified as uninhabitable by galactic standards, then humans are essentially adapted to survive in conditions that would kill our enemies. Engineer Neon had been working on modifications to human equipment based on captured alien technology, but her perspective had shifted dramatically with the new information. Instead of trying to copy alien systems, she began adapting them to work in Earth's environment. Their technology is impressive in controlled conditions, she reported, but it fails rapidly when exposed to Earth-normal environmental stresses. We can build hybrid systems that combine their advanced materials with our adaptive engineering. The results were remarkable. Human weapons powered by alien energy cells could operate in conditions that would shut down pure alien technology. Human vehicles equipped with alien systems could traverse terrain that alien craft couldn't approach. Most importantly, human soldiers wearing modified alien armor could fight effectively in environments that would incapacitate alien forces. Pilot Kyung-min tested the first hybrid aircraft, a human fighter equipped with alien propulsion systems and Earth-adapted controls. The performance was extraordinary. Faster than pure human aircraft, but far more maneuverable than alien equivalents in Earth's atmosphere. It's like they built their technology for flying in a swimming pool, she reported after her test flight. When you adapt it for real atmospheric conditions, the performance improvement is incredible. The captured alien database contained detailed information about other worlds in the galaxy, and specialist Wonho spent days analyzing the environmental classifications. What he found was a galaxy full of stable, predictable worlds where life had evolved without the constant environmental pressures that had shaped Earth. Most inhabited worlds are Class 2 or 3, he reported. Stable climate, predictable geology, minimal predation pressure. The highest classification most galactic species have experienced is Class 6, and that's considered an extreme death world by their standards. Earth was literally off their scale. The Class Dostine designation had been created specifically for worlds too dangerous for galactic civilization to colonize. The fact that Earth had produced an intelligent species capable of spaceflight was apparently considered a scientific impossibility by most galactic civilizations. Dr. Jisu's biological analysis of alien specimens confirmed the environmental data. The self-proclaimed deathworlders who dominated galactic civilization were adapted to high-gravity worlds with dense atmospheres, but those worlds were environmentally stable in ways that Earth had never been. Their physiology shows adaptations to consistent environmental pressures, she reported. High gravity, dense atmosphere, but very little evidence of adaptation to environmental variability. They're stronger than humans in absolute terms, but they can't adapt to changing conditions. The revelation explained everything about the invasion's failure. The aliens had expected to fight soft creatures from a comfortable world, but instead they were fighting survivors of a planet that regularly experienced extinction-level environmental catastrophes. Humans didn't just live with danger, they had been shaped by millions of years of constant environmental threat. We're not fighting aliens, Captain Jiwon realized as she reviewed the complete picture. We're fighting the galactic equivalent of greenhouse flowers who have never experienced a real storm. The knowledge was spreading through human resistance networks worldwide, carried by every successful engagement and every captured piece of alien technology. Humans began to understand that their apparent disadvantages, their need to adapt constantly to changing conditions, their comfort with environmental uncertainty, their ability to function effectively while under stress, were actually evolutionary advantages that no galactic species possessed. Lieutenant Hyun-woo's latest boarding action had captured an alien communications array, providing direct access to enemy transmissions. What the humans heard was equally revealing. Alien forces calling for evacuation, requesting environmental support, and describing Earth as unsurvivable for extended operations. "They're talking about our planet like it's hell," Hyun-woo reported, with dark amusement. "Apparently, the humidity is dangerously variable, and the temperature fluctuations are life-threatening." The psychological effect on human forces was dramatic. Soldiers who had felt intimidated by alien technology now understood that their enemies were fighting at a severe disadvantage simply by being on Earth. The home field advantage wasn't just tactical, it was biological. For the first time since the invasion began, humans began to believe they could not only survive the alien attack, but actually win the war. They weren't the primitive underdogs they had assumed themselves to be. They were the products of the most dangerous world in known galactic space. And they were finally meeting enemies who couldn't match their fundamental adaptation to survive an impossible condition. The emergency assembly of the full Galactic Council represented the largest gathering of interstellar civilizations in recorded history. Over 200 species had sent representatives to address what was now being called the Sol Crisis. The massive chamber thrummed with tension as delegates struggled to comprehend reports that challenged 3 millennia of assumptions about galactic power structures. Admiral Crixtel stood before the assembly, his once proud bearing reduced to barely controlled desperation. Behind him, holographic displays showed the unthinkable. Vorthak fleet elements in full retreat from a primitive system, followed by what could only be described as human pursuit forces. "The situation has evolved beyond our ability to contain," he announced to the shocked assembly. "Human forces have captured significant portions of our fleet and are now demonstrating spaceflight capabilities that exceed their previous technological profile." The silence that followed was deafening. For thousands of years, technological advancement had been the primary measure of species superiority. The idea that a primitive civilization could rapidly develop advanced capabilities in the middle of a war was unprecedented. On Earth, General Do-Yun coordinated the planet's first offensive operations from his command center in the Siberian mountains. The underground facility buzzed with activity as human engineers worked around the clock to modify captured alien spacecraft for human use. What had seemed impossible just months earlier was now routine. Humans flying alien ships, using alien weapons, and employing alien technology in ways its creators had never imagined. "Status report on the orbital platforms," he requested from his tactical officer. "All 6 platforms are operational, General. Human crews have successfully integrated our control systems with alien technology. We now have effective orbital defense coverage for the entire planet." The captured alien vessels had been more than just tactical victories. They were technological gold mines that allowed humanity to leap centuries ahead in space flight capability. But more importantly, they provided the means to take the war to the enemy's doorstep. Admiral Yunji reviewed the deployment orders for Earth's first interstellar expedition. 3 months ago, she had been commanding coastal defense vessels against conventional threats. Now she was preparing to lead a fleet of hybrid human-alien warships on humanity's first offensive operation beyond the solar system. "Remember, we're not trying to conquer territory," she addressed her ship commanders. "Our objective is to liberate the worlds these aliens have enslaved and demonstrate that their empire can be challenged." The fleet that departed Earth bore little resemblance to anything the galaxy had seen before. Human engineering had transformed captured alien vessels into something new, ships that combined advanced alien technology with human adaptive design principles. Where alien vessels required perfect conditions to operate efficiently, human modifications allowed them to function effectively across a wide range of environmental parameters. Pilot Kyung-min led the fighter squadrons as they approached their first target, a Vorthak forward base in the Proxima Centauri system. The intelligence gathered from captured databases had revealed that the aliens maintained supply stations throughout local space, all designed to support operations in safe galactic environments. All squadrons, remember the atmospheric data she transmitted to her pilots. This system's primary world has a dense, turbulent atmosphere. Perfect conditions for human pilots, nightmare conditions for alien systems. The attack began at dawn on the alien world, with human fighters diving through atmospheric conditions that grounded the defending alien aircraft. The base's automated defenses had been designed to counter attacks by conventional galactic forces, not by opponents who could fly effectively in weather patterns that alien technology couldn't handle. "They're not even trying to intercept us," one of Kyung-min's pilots reported in amazement. "Their fighters won't launch in these atmospheric conditions." The base fell in less than an hour, but what the humans found there was more valuable than any military victory. Thousands of aliens from dozens of different species, all enslaved by the Vorthak Empire, all waiting to be liberated. Commander Min Seok had been tasked with establishing contact with the freed populations, but he quickly discovered that most of them couldn't comprehend what was happening. The concept of successfully resisting Vorthak domination was literally unthinkable to species that had been conditioned to accept deathworlder supremacy. "They keep asking when the real Vorthak fleet will arrive to reclaim them," he reported to Admiral Yoonji. "They can't believe that humans could defeat their former masters in direct combat." But the evidence was undeniable. Human forces had not only survived Vorthak attacks, but had systematically dismantled their local infrastructure. More disturbing to galactic thinking, humans were doing it while protecting non-combatant populations, a concept that most galactic species found strategically incomprehensible. The psychological warfare implications were enormous. Species that had accepted Vorthak dominance for centuries were seeing their supposedly invincible overlords fleeing from creatures they had never heard of. The myth of deathworlder invincibility was crumbling with each human victory. Major Sunmi led ground forces in the liberation of the mining colony on Kepler 442b, the same world that Admiral Kriegstall had been celebrating just months earlier. The Vorthak garrison surrendered without firing a shot when human forces emerged from environmental conditions that should have been instantly lethal. "They're more afraid of the weather than they are of us," one of her soldiers observed as they processed alien prisoners who were desperately trying to reach their environmental shelters. The liberated Kalani population watched in amazement as human soldiers worked comfortably in atmospheric conditions that required their former masters to wear full environmental suits. For the first time in generations, they began to believe that freedom from deathworlder domination might actually be possible. Dr. Jisoo had accompanied the expedition to gather biological data on galactic species, and her findings were revolutionizing human understanding of their place in the galaxy. Every species they encountered showed the same pattern: evolution on stable worlds with predictable environments, resulting in highly specialized but inflexible biology. We're seeing the same evolutionary strategy across dozens of different species, she reported. High efficiency in optimal conditions, but rapid performance degradation when conditions change. Humans are literally the only known species that evolved generalized adaptability. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just different from other galactic species, they were fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization as it had developed. While other species had evolved toward specialization and efficiency, humans had been forced by their environment to remain adaptable and resilient. Engineer Yeji had been working with liberated populations to understand alien technology from the user perspective, and what she discovered explained much about galactic stagnation. Most alien technology was designed to be operated by the same species that built it, with little consideration for adaptability or modification. Their equipment literally cannot be modified safely, she reported. It's designed with built-in limitations that prevent unauthorized changes. Any attempt to adapt it to different conditions or users causes system failures. This explained why galactic civilization had remained technologically static for millennia. Species developed technology for their specific needs and environments, then shared it unchanged with allied species. The concept of rapid technological adaptation that humans considered normal was apparently unknown in galactic engineering. The captured alien databases revealed the true scope of galactic civilization, and specialist Wanho's analysis painted a picture of a galaxy dominated by a relatively small number of deathworlder species who ruled through technological and military superiority. But that superiority was based on fighting opponents who were even less adapted to dangerous conditions than they were. The entire galactic power structure is based on a hierarchy of environmental adaptation, he reported. Species from Class 6 worlds dominate those from Class 3 worlds, who in turn dominate Class 1 world inhabitants. Nobody has ever encountered a Class 3 species before. Psychologist Namjoon had been working with liberated populations to understand the psychological impact of deathworlder domination, and his findings revealed the depth of conditioning that kept galactic civilizations stable. Most species had been taught from birth that environmental adaptation equated to natural superiority. They've been conditioned to believe that their inability to survive in dangerous environments makes them naturally inferior, he reported. Breaking. This conditioning will require careful psychological rehabilitation. But the mere existence of successful human resistance was already having an impact. Reports from across the galaxy described unrest on dominated worlds as news of human victories. Spread. Species that had accepted their subjugation for generations were beginning to question whether their oppressors were truly as invincible as they claimed. The Galactic Council's emergency session was interrupted by reports of uprisings on 17 different worlds. The news that a previously unknown species had defeated Vorthak forces was spreading faster than Offici. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy was transforming in ways that no one could have predicted. What had begun as a routine conquest of Earth had become a revolution that was toppling the established order across hundreds of star systems. Human fleets moved through galactic space like a force of nature, liberating enslaved worlds and dismantling the infrastructure of oppression that had existed for millennia. Major Sunmi stood on the command deck of the Liberation Fleet flagship, watching as another Vorthak stronghold surrendered without a fight. The former Deathworld overlords had learned that fighting humans in any environment was a losing proposition, but their psychological conditioning made surrender almost as difficult as resistance. "This is the 17th garrison to surrender this month," her aide reported. "The Vorthak forces are requesting safe passage to neutral territory in exchange for releasing their enslaved populations." "Granted," Sunmi replied without hesitation. "But they surrender all military equipment and submit to monitoring. We're not conquerors, we're liberators." The distinction was important, both tactically and psychologically. Human forces consistently demonstrated behavior that was unprecedented in galactic military history. They protected non-combatants, treated prisoners humanely, and showed genuine concern for the welfare of liberated populations. For species conditioned to expect brutality from their rulers, human behavior was profoundly disorienting. Captain Minselk had been assigned to establish diplomatic relations with newly liberated worlds, and he found himself dealing with populations that had no framework for understanding human motivations. Most galactic species assumed that military victory would be followed by exploitation and domination, because that was how galactic politics had always worked. "They keep asking what we want from them," he reported to the Fleet Command. "The concept that we might actually mean it when we say we're fighting for their freedom is apparently incomprehensible to most galactic thinking, but the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Human forces consistently withdrew from liberated worlds after establishing local self-government and defense capabilities. They left behind technology and training, but they didn't establish colonies or extract tribute. The behavior violated every assumption about how stronger species treated weaker ones. Engineer Yeji had been working with liberated populations to adapt human-modified alien technology for use by other species. What she discovered was that most galactic civilizations had never developed the engineering flexibility that humans considered normal. "They're amazed by our ability to modify equipment on the fly," she reported. "Their entire technological philosophy is based on standardization and long-term reliability. The idea of rapid adaptation to changing needs is foreign to their thinking." The technological exchange was revolutionary in ways that went far beyond military applications. Human adaptive engineering principles were being combined with advanced alien materials and power systems to create hybrid technologies that performed better than either human or alien equipment alone. The psychological impact was spreading through galactic civilization like a virus. Species that had accepted their inferior status for generations were beginning to understand that the deathworlder hierarchy was based on incomplete information. Earth had produced a species more adapted to dangerous conditions than any of their supposed superiors. Dr. Jisu's continuing biological analysis of galactic species had revealed the full scope of human uniqueness. After examining specimens from over 50 different worlds, she had confirmed that humans were the only known species that had evolved general adaptability rather than specialized optimization. "Every other species we've encountered shows the same evolutionary pattern," she reported to the Scientific Council. "They've evolved to be highly efficient in their specific environmental niche, but they can't adapt quickly to changing conditions." This evolutionary difference explained everything about human military success. While other species fought to apply their specific advantages in optimal conditions, humans fought by creating conditions that favored adaptability over specialization. Commander Sung-ho led the new Galactic Defense Coalition, a military organization unlike anything that had existed before in galactic history. Instead of being dominated by a single species or alliance, it was truly multinational, with humans serving alongside liberated species in integrated units. "The key is playing to everyone's strengths," he explained to his mixed species officer, Core. "Granite Lords excel at defensive operations in stable positions. Chitic collectives are unmatched at coordination and logistics. Humans provide adaptability and rapid response capabilities. The coalition was proving more effective than traditional galactic military structures because it was designed around cooperation rather than domination. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together against the common threat of deathworlder oppression. Pilot Kyung-min had been training coalition pilots in human flight techniques, and the results were extraordinary. While alien pilots couldn't match human adaptability, they could learn to use their species-specific advantages more effectively when combined with human tactical thinking. "The Shard Collective pilots are incredible in space combat," she reported after a joint training exercise. "Their crystalline physiology gives them perfect spatial awareness, but they never learned to use it tactically because their training focused on individual superiority rather than unit coordination. The liberated populations were contributing capabilities that even humans hadn't possessed, creating a coalition that was genuinely more powerful than the sum of its parts. Human adaptability combined with alien specializations was producing military capabilities that no single species could achieve alone." Psychologist Nam June had been working with former slaves to overcome the psychological conditioning that had kept them subjugated, and his research was revealing the true genius of the deathworlder dominance system. The oppressed populations had been convinced that their survival traits were weaknesses rather than strengths. "They've been taught that cooperation is a sign of inferiority," he reported. "Deathworlder ideology emphasizes individual dominance and species supremacy. The concept that diversity might actually be a strength was systematically suppressed. But as liberated populations began working together under human leadership, they were discovering capabilities they had never known they possessed. Species that had been considered weak by deathworlder standards were proving to have unique advantages that became powerful when properly applied. The Galactic Council's authority was crumbling as more worlds declared independence and joined the Liberation Coalition. The supposedly invincible deathworlder species found themselves facing coordinated resistance from dozens of former subject populations, all trained and equipped by humans who understood how to turn diversity into strength. Admiral Krixtal made one final attempt to rally the remaining deathworlder alliances, but his appeals for unity fell on deaf ears. The other major powers had seen what happened to Vorthak forces that faced humans in direct combat, and none of them were eager to repeat the experience. "The humans have destroyed our fundamental advantage," he admitted to the Emergency War Council. "They've proven that environmental adaptation isn't a sign of natural superiority. It's just one evolutionary strategy among many." The admission marked the end of an era. For the first time in galactic history, the ruling powers were acknowledging that their dominance had been based on flawed assumptions rather than inherent superiority. Specialist Wanho had been analyzing intelligence reports from across the galaxy, tracking the spread of human influence and the collapse of traditional power structures. The data painted a picture of transformation that was happening faster than anyone had thought possible. 47 worlds have declared independence in the last month, he reported. The Deathworlder alliances are fragmenting as member species. Realize they can't count on military superiority anymore. The revolution wasn't just military, it was ideological. The entire concept of species hierarchy based on environmental adaptation was being replaced by a new understanding of diversity as strength. Humans hadn't just defeated the galactic establishment. They had proven that cooperation could triumph over domination. Dr. Soyeon had been coordinating medical aid to liberated populations, and her work had revealed another dimension of deathworlder oppression. Many species had been deliberately kept in poor health to maintain their dependence on their rulers. They've been systematically denied access to medical knowledge that could improve their life expectancy and quality of life, she reported. It's another form of control, keeping subject populations too weak and short-lived to develop effective resistance. Human medical knowledge combined with alien biotechnology was producing treatments that were revolutionizing life expectancy across liberated worlds. Species that had been told they were naturally inferior were discovering that their limitations had been artificially imposed. The tide had turned completely. Human fleets controlled most of the major space lanes. Liberated populations were establishing their own governments, and the former Deathworlder rulers were either in exile or attempting to negotiate surrender terms. What had seemed like humanity's darkest hour when the aliens first arrived had, 6 months after first contact, the galaxy was transforming in ways that no one could have predicted. What had begun as a routine conquest of Earth had become a revolution that was toppling the established order across hundreds of star systems. Human fleets moved through galactic space like a force of nature, liberating enslaved worlds and dismantling the infrastructure of oppression that had existed for millennia. Major Sunmi stood on the command deck of the Liberation Fleet flagship, watching as another Vorthak stronghold surrendered without a fight. The former Deathworld overlords had learned that fighting humans in any environment was a losing proposition, but their psychological conditioning made surrender almost as difficult as resistance. "This is the 17th garrison to surrender this month," her aide reported. "The Vorthak forces are requesting safe passage to neutral territory in exchange for releasing their enslaved populations." "Granted," Sunmi replied without hesitation. "But they surrender all military equipment and submit to monitoring. We're not conquerors. We're liberators." The distinction was important, both tactically and psychologically. Human forces consistently demonstrated behavior that was unprecedented in galactic military history. They protected non-combatants, treated prisoners humanely, and showed genuine concern for the welfare of liberated populations. For species conditioned to expect brutality from their rulers, human behavior was profoundly disorienting. Captain Min Seok had been assigned to establish diplomatic relations with newly liberated worlds, and he found himself dealing with populations that had no framework for understanding human motivations. Most galactic species assumed that military victory would be followed by exploitation and domination, because that was how galactic politics had always worked. "They keep asking what we want from them," he reported to the fleet command. "The concept that we might actually mean it when we say we're fighting for their freedom is apparently incomprehensible to most galactic thinking, but the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Human forces consistently withdrew from liberated worlds after establishing local self-government and defense capabilities. They left behind technology and training, but they didn't establish colonies or extract tribute. The behavior violated every assumption about how stronger species treated weaker ones. Engineer Yeji had been working with liberated populations to adapt human-modified alien technology for use by other species. What she discovered was that most galactic civilizations had never developed the engineering flexibility that humans considered normal. "They're amazed by our ability to modify equipment on the fly," she reported. "Their entire technological philosophy is based on standardization and long-term reliability. The idea of rapid adaptation to changing needs is foreign to their thinking." The technological exchange was revolutionary in ways that went far beyond military applications. Human adaptive engineering principles were being combined with advanced alien materials and power systems to create hybrid technologies that performed better than either human or alien equipment alone. The psychological impact was spreading through galactic civilization like a virus. Species that had accepted their inferior status for generations were beginning to understand that the deathworlder hierarchy was based on incomplete information. Earth had produced a species more adapted to dangerous conditions than any of their supposed superiors. Dr. Jisu's continuing biological analysis of galactic species had revealed the full scope of human uniqueness. After examining specimens from over 50 different worlds, she had confirmed that humans were the only known species that had evolved general adaptability rather than specialized optimization. Every other species we've encountered shows the same evolutionary pattern, she reported to the Scientific Council. They've evolved to be highly efficient in their specific environmental niche, but they can't adapt quickly to changing conditions. This evolutionary difference explained everything about human military success. While other species fought to apply their specific advantages in optimal conditions, humans fought by creating conditions that favored adaptability over specialization. Commander Seung-ho led the new Galactic Defense Coalition, a military organization unlike anything that had existed before in galactic history. Instead of being dominated by a single species or alliance, it was truly multinational, with humans serving alongside liberated species in integrated units. The key is playing to everyone's strengths, he explained to his mixed species officer. Core. Granite Lords excel at defensive operations in stable positions. Chitic collectives are unmatched at coordination and logistics. Humans provide adaptability and rapid response capabilities. The coalition was proving more effective than traditional galactic military structures because it was designed around cooperation rather than domination. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together against the common threat of deathworlder oppression. Pilot Kyungmin had been training coalition pilots in human flight techniques, and the results were extraordinary. While alien pilots couldn't match human adaptability, they could learn to use their species-specific advantages more effectively when combined with human tactical thinking. The Shard Collective pilots are incredible in space combat, she reported after a joint training exercise. Their crystalline physiology gives them perfect spatial awareness, but they never learn to use it tactically because their training focused on individual superiority rather than unit coordination. The liberated populations were contributing capabilities that even humans hadn't possessed, creating a coalition that was genuinely more powerful than the sum of its parts. Human adaptability combined with alien specializations was producing military capabilities that no single species could achieve alone. Psychologist Nam Jun had been working with former slaves to overcome the psychological conditioning that had kept them subjugated, and his research was revealing the true genius of the deathworlder dominance system. The oppressed populations had been convinced that their survival traits were weaknesses rather than strengths. They've been taught that cooperation is a sign of inferiority, he reported. Deathworlder ideology emphasizes individual dominance and species supremacy. The concept that diversity might actually be a strength was systematically suppressed. But as liberated populations began working together under human leadership, they were discovering capabilities they had never known they possessed. Species that had been considered weak by deathworlder standards were proving to have unique advantages that became powerful when properly applied. The Galactic Council's authority was crumbling as more worlds declared independence and joined the Liberation Coalition. The supposedly invincible deathworlder species found themselves facing coordinated resistance from dozens of former subject populations, all trained and equipped by humans who understood how to turn diversity into strength. Admiral Kriegstall made one final attempt to rally the remaining deathworlder alliances, but his appeals for unity fell on deaf ears. The other major powers had seen what happened to Vorthak forces that faced humans in direct combat, and none of them were eager to repeat the experience. "The humans have destroyed our fundamental advantage," he admitted to the Emergency War Council. "They've proven that environmental adaptation isn't a sign of natural superiority. It's just one evolutionary strategy among many. The admission marked the end of an era. For the first time in galactic history, the ruling powers were acknowledging that their dominance had been based on flawed assumptions rather than inherent superiority. Specialist Wanho had been analyzing intelligence reports from across the galaxy, tracking the spread of human influence and the collapse of traditional power structures. The data painted a picture of transformation that was happening faster than anyone had thought possible. 47 worlds have declared independence in the last month, he reported. The Deathworlder alliances are fragmenting as member species realize they can't count on military superiority anymore. The revolution wasn't just military, it was ideological. The entire concept of species hierarchy based on environmental adaptation was being replaced by a new understanding of diversity as strength. Humans hadn't just defeated the galactic establishment. They had proven that cooperation could triumph over domination. Dr. Soyon had been coordinating medical aid to liberated populations, and her work had revealed another dimension of deathworlder oppression. Many species had been deliberately kept in poor health to maintain their dependence on their rulers. They've been systematically denied access to medical knowledge that could improve their life expectancy and quality of life, she reported. It's another form of control, keeping subject populations too weak and short-lived to develop effective resistance. Human medical knowledge, combined with alien biotechnology, was producing treatments that were revolutionizing life expectancy across liberated worlds. Species that had been told they were naturally inferior were discovering that their limitations had been artificially imposed. The tide had turned completely. Human fleets controlled most of the major space lanes. Liberated populations were establishing their own governments, and the former Deathworlder rulers were either in exile or attempting to negotiate surrender terms. What had seemed like humanity's darkest hour when the aliens first arrived had